examples. If you don't, you're not going to be able to start a problem. So let's start there. Every single one of them should have one of two words as the first word. What are those two options? Population or sample. If it says population first, that means it is a what? Parameter. If it says sample, then it is a statistic. So what is this one? Don't mark anything on the paper in front of you unless something needs to be wrong. Like, don't do any checks so that I'm literally looking at just what was altered. If something was wrong or missing, write it in. What's this one? Population standard deviation. What's this one? Sample standard deviation. And if you're marking somebody else's, if it's wrong, like write in the right one. Don't just mark it wrong. What is this one? Which is sample proportion. What is S squared? Sample what? Variance. What is mu of p hat? Well, mu means it's definitely what? It's mean of what, which was yesterday? Sampling distribution. And you can either write p hat there or sample proportion. So either one written there. Lowercase n is what? Sample size.
Can't do sample population.
No, that's complicated. What is X bar? Sample mean. What is sigma of p hat?
Standard deviation.
Standard deviation of sampling distribution of sample proportion or of p hat. What is capital N? Population size.
Would you count off if it's just like population?
Yes.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot on here that would be just population.
Or if they said total?
Population total is fine. Lowercase p is what?
Population proportion.
Population proportion. And sigma squared is population variance. So again, like I just said, anything that says the word sample first is a statistic. Anything that says the word population first is a parameter. No, I have a problem in front of me. Hey, go on to the next side. What is the first part of state? Population. What is our population here? Yeah, what's wordy? I'm gonna type it. This one does get pretty wordy. Oh no, this one's not. So population is 18-year-old, what? Now this is something we have not had to talk about a whole lot because it hasn't come up yet. Did anybody put something that looks like that that's maybe a little bit different or a little bit more specific and they think it could work as being correct? All women in the United States might possibly work because you're selecting from them, but you're just selecting the ones that are 18-year-olds. All 18-year-old women at this college would work. So what's most important here is, what is our sample? Good. That what? Yours might be worded slightly different than that, but getting to the exact same thing there. So I'm not looking for word there because it kind of took word for word from different places, and that's fine. But this group can be generalized to different populations. I could generalize it to all female students at this particular college. I could generalize it to all females in the United States. I could generalize it to all 18-year-old women in college. So with these, the population is going to have a little bit more leeway than we usually do as opposed to, or for what your answer has to be. Questions on population versus sample there?
Does the sample have to have reported their height and weight to the
I am fine with this one because the ones that were selected were the ones that did that. And so not writing this part, the problem implies that part, and I'm fine with that. All right, so what's my next part? Which is what? Now, this is one thing that I wanted to talk about with homework a little bit. P is a what kind of proportion? Population proportion. So if you're going to write of somebody, you'd better write what you wrote as your population. So if I write proportion of something, I'm going to write proportion of 18-year-old women in the United States because that's word for what my population says. Because I've already written down population, I can technically here write population that what? Or proportion that what? Because then I could put together the two things I've defined and say P is proportion that are overweight of who. Well, I've already written what my population is, so I don't technically have to write that twice. But I think probably all my answer keys that I'll post have it written with that as well. All right, then what? What am I finding here? And that has to be a hat right here. Converting this is fine. 0.155. I don't think it reduces. Questions with state. Plan. Where do I start? 10% condition. What do I write? What's our sample size? And again here, you might written something different as your population than somebody else, but what you write here better match your population that you wrote down. So at this point, I'm no longer essentially grading that this is correct. I am grading that it matches this. Because you've already defined it as this, so I'm seeing if you matched it with the way you defined it. So there are at least 2,000. So that should be word for word, however you decided to word your population. What's my next condition? What am I checking? Saying more than is fine. Like, it should match this, but more than qualifies, and that's fine. All right, so my N here is what? 200, so 200 times 0.22. Makes this one 200 times. And 200 times 0.22 gives me 44. And which leaves me with how much for this one? What I heard was a 2, and that didn't sound right. Now what? What? And you could have done it with are overweight, are not overweight, or gone with BMI. I switched it for the problem for you guys so that we weren't having to deal with greater and less than with BMI. We just talked about overweight. Questions with conditions. All right, so now I am down to math, which is due. Yes, thank you. Sorry, I'm out of room here and I'm forgetting. I should have also written, so we can. And somebody in my last class asked, so why don't we write that here? Like, so we can use this because we essentially write it with standard deviation, and we're writing, so we can use standard deviation because of this. We basically just write it in another place. I do. What's the first thing I write? So symbols wise, I write what? The mu of p hat, which equals 0.22. And then I go into what? Sigma of p hat, which is what equation? Square root of divided by what's p? 0.22, which leaves me with 1 minus p being 0.78. And I'm dividing it by and what does that give you? Oh, 132, is that what y'all getting? Am I good or do I need to write something?
With the standard deviation should be 0.0293.
Yeah, I got it.
That's like the least worry.
Oh, yeah, I'm looking at the wrong one.
Don't say that.
0293, yes, I'm looking at one line down. Alright, what else?
Because of 10% commission.
Now what? Probability of p hat
Less than 31 over 200.
and again here 31 over 200 or 0.155, either one is fine. What do I do with that? So what numbers go in my equation?
31.
Minus
0.2.
divided by
0.02.
which gives me
Negative
2.22, is that what we're getting? Yes. Complete side note here. What does this mean? Probability. So would I ever write a probability right here? I'm still getting that on the test, even though I've talked about that and put it on the quiz that y'all had. Never put a probability, like p parentheses, don't put an answer to a probability inside of p parentheses. Because then you're saying the probability of a probability. And that doesn't make sense. So now that I have that, I rewrite it. P parentheses what? Z is less than or equal to if it's something like if like this is a probability, you would never write like probability of the probability of it happening. You put probability of it. Right. So that is a negative number, so it's over here. Which way do I shade? To the left, because it says less than. And I end up getting an area of what? And then I conclude, if we were to what? Randomly select how many? 200 what? And the students, I think 18-year-old would make more sense here. Students from this particular large university. And some people are going to put stuff about and collecting their weight and height. Should make sense. What? Before that. P equals 0.22. The probability that what? directional wording for inequality. Word from the problem. It said at most, right?
It said 31 out of 200 or less.
Okay. Probability that 31 or 200 out of 200 or less. What? Is 0.0132. Now give it back to the other person first so that they can see it, but then you're going to turn it into me.